I wanted to start today's podcast just really by saying a huge thank you to all of you who've been so incredibly supportive and lovely with your feedback and joining in with this new mad little venture of mine. I mean, goodness knows, it's not like I don't already have 0 free hours in the day. I don't entirely know how I think I'm going to fit all of this stuff in, but it's been genuinely a joy. I've enjoyed doing it so much. It's a little bit scary with the blog because it built up very gradually for a long time when my writing was shit, and my God, my writing was shit. There was only me really reading it, so that was okay. Whereas I think this time, podcasting something completely new, something I've never tried before, and I'm conscious that I'm doing it with a sort of a little bit of a ready-built audience. But thank you all so much for kind of bearing with me. I'm sure I will make inevitable mistakes along the way as I get my head around it all, but your feedback is always so welcome. If there's things you want to hear me ramble on about, I'll chat about anything basically. So if there's things you'd like to hear me talk about, I'm very, very happy to do so. But I did just want to start with a massive thank you to you all for coming along on a little bit more of the I Know I Need to Stop Talking journey. An ironic blog title given the podcasting that I'm now doing. So I thought in this week's podcast I'd chat to you all a little bit about kind of, I suppose, what our lockdown experience has been like. I'm conscious that actually we are now coming out the other side of lockdown. The schools are going back. Hallelujah. I will be the woman queuing outside the school in the manner of someone queuing up for Wimbledon tickets, I imagine. My children may be somewhat less enamoured. But kind of, I thought it would be nice to go back and sort of tell you a little bit what we found life to be like during lockdown. And I know that everybody's lockdown experience has been really different. I heard somewhere about some people who were like thinking of creating a 2020 time capsule to remember all the stuff they've done in lockdown. Am I the only one who literally wishes I could fucking wipe 2020 from my memory and never have to think of it again? Maybe that's just me. Maybe you hadn't had more joyous lockdown times. And to be fair, we've been really lucky in lockdown. I'm very conscious of that. Anyway, before I get onto that, I appreciate that last week we talked about school uniform buying. So there is an update on the school uniform buying front. My God, it's sometimes like this blog writes itself. So I think I said last time that, of course, absolutely guaranteed, we'd gone to the shop. Of course, 1 or 2 of the items weren't going to fit. Standard. Quite rightly with COVID, you can't try items on in the school uniform shop quite correctly. So we came back and a couple of the items didn't fit, particularly for Jamie, because as I ably and adeptly told the sales lady, his size is massive. He's so tall. Do you ever look at your child and you're like, how did they fit up? Let's not even go there. Anyway, so we went back to the shop, Jamie and I, back to the school uniform shop. I mean, getting him out of the house is literally like pulling teeth. I came back. I had to go into the office, so I came back from the office. I said to him, right, come on, we're going to go to the uniform shop. Oh, why? Why have we got to go to the school uniform shop? I said, well, so that you have items of school uniform that will fit. Oh, well, can I go like this? In his dressing gown and his pants. And I was like, it's not ideal, is it? Anyway, eventually, after much huffing and puffing and grunting and telling me that he had no clothes whatsoever to wear, we'll come on to clothes and what my children have worn during lockdown a little bit later in this podcast. We got out the house, we left the house, we got to the shop, we popped our masks on, we pretended we were superheroes because that's what you have to do when you wear a mask, it's probably the law. And we went into the shop, and again, the ladies were terribly lovely. So I had a skirt that I had to exchange for a bigger size for Beth because she seems to have the longest legs in the world, and a top that I had to exchange for Jamie because he is massive and the top was insufficiently massive. And we queued up, and the very nice lady looked at them and went out the back and came back out and said, yeah, no, we've got none of those left in either of those sizes. So good. So that was marvellous. There wasn't even anything else in the shop that we wanted that would have justified the trip out. So we got back in the car and Jamie looked at me and was like, you made me get dressed to go to a shop to buy nothing. Yes, son, yes I did. Chalk it up as one of those delightful bonding experiences and leave it as that. So the school uniform debacle rumbles on. The shop has ordered in the special massive items that I'm missing. They've promised to call me when they come in. Quite what my children will be wearing to go to school in the interim period, given it's about a 3-week lead time, is anyone's guess. But as with most things in 2020, I figure we'll take things one day at a time. We'll work it out as we go along. I'm sure it will be all right in the end, she says, hysterically rocking in a corner, swigging gin straight from the bottle. So that's the latest on school uniform buying. So goodness knows what will happen next. I will of course keep you all posted. I bet you can't wait. God, it's a joy. So back to, well, lockdown. I suppose we're not really in lockdown anymore, are we? I don't know. I mean, until I can go up randomly to anybody I want to and give them the biggest hug in the world, I will always slightly feel like I'm in lockdown, but maybe that's just me. But it's been a funny old year, hasn't it? I think when midnight chimed at, sort of the end of 2019, and everybody was like, oh, how exciting. What are you planning to do in 2020? Who knew that the greatest ambition that any of us might want to achieve would be achieving a supermarket delivery slot sometime before 2027? How aspirations change. So we all went into lockdown actually a week before the schools closed down, thanks to Jamie having picked up a cough, which seemed to go on for approximately 12 years. Has he had COVID? Who knows? Have any of us had COVID? Who knows? Either way, certainly back in early March, it was somewhat and entirely understandably unacceptable to wander around sounding like you'd been smoking 500 a day. So we went into lockdown a week early. And probably like most of us kind of, sort of thought, well, they'll be back in school in a couple of weeks. It'll all be fine. 6 months later, turned out not to be quite that simple. As I said at the start of this podcast, I'm conscious that we are incredibly, incredibly lucky as a family. So we live in a house. We have a decent sized garden. We've got loads of lovely walks on our doorstep, which is amazing. And in this period of lockdown, both myself and Mr. I Know I Need to Stop Talking have both been able to do our jobs full time from home. So I know full well how lucky we have been. But even so, fucking hell, it's been a bit much, hasn't it? It's just been such a weird year. And I think when we kind of first went into lockdown, I don't know about anybody else, there was a little bit of a novelty, wasn't there? It was a bit like, oh, we're all at home together, how exciting. And I think that novelty probably lasted for about 37 seconds before one of the children looked at a piece of air that the other child was thinking of looking at or something like that. And then lockdown just became like that bit between Christmas and New Year when nobody knows what day it is or which way up they are or really what the purpose of anything is at all. Only it was shitter because at least in that period you usually have a shed load of excess alcohol and chocolate and cheese. Cheese, if that's your thing. Cheese isn't my thing, and I know that is probably the revelation that has rocked my blog followers the most over the years. Can't fucking stand cheese. I don't understand the point of it at all. Anyway, I digress. This is not a podcast about cheese. So lockdown started, and as I say, the novelty wore off pretty quickly. And I think, like most parents, my immediate and main, most pressing concern was, well, how are the kids going to cope with all of this? How are they going to find it? And absolute credit to both of them. They have been little superstars. They haven't been little; they've been massive superstars because they're both verging on being taller than me. Beth's not far off now, but they've been amazing throughout the entire period of time. And I think. Well, we'll come on to Jamie. We'll come on to Jamie in a moment and Jamie's views on lockdown. I was worried about Beth. Because of the sheer amount of football she does. So I think, as most of you know, she plays for 2 different teams. So she was training and playing matches probably 8 or 9 times a week. And like a tap, all of that literally, for all the right reasons, was turned off overnight. I was also worried about her because she's very sociable. She's got a very close-knit group of friends, and sitting right at the middle of that group of friends is her BFF, who I've talked about on the blog before. I've outlined their incredible wedding in the middle of our street, which I think Jamie is still emotionally scarred by. But I was genuinely worried how the two of them were going to cope with not seeing each other, because they live just a few roads apart. They see each other at school every day. But again, kids are so creative and so resilient. So we couldn't have been in lockdown more than a couple of days. And Beth said to me, "Oh, can I speak to sort of my best friend?" And I said, "Yeah, no problem. Do you want to call her?" And she was like, "No, we'll FaceTime. Kids are so savvy. No, Mum. No, we'll FaceTime." I was like, "Okay, fine. You guys can FaceTime." So we set the two of them up with their mum's phones and everything. And I thought they'd have a brief chat and forget about it. Oh my goodness, like the first couple of weeks of lockdown, they were on FaceTime like, it felt like 24 hours a day. And they didn't just chat, they played I Spy on FaceTime, they picked out outfits for each other, they did their hair and makeup together over FaceTime, and my absolute genuine favourite, probably lockdown moment of all was when I came downstairs and found them both sat in their own houses with their phones propped up in front of them over FaceTime playing a duet together. Oh my heart, they are absolute sweethearts. They really are, the two of them. So they have stayed in touch on FaceTime throughout lockdown, and I think I chronicled on the blog when they were finally able to get back together face to face. It was very emotional. They were very sweet. They're very sweet. So yes, so Beth's been amazing. Jamie, I mean, he's just a joy. So he's obviously 12. He'll be 13 soon. Jamie has described lockdown to me as the greatest period of his life to date. I cannot tell you how much he has loved his lockdown experience. He's not had to go to school, which he sees as a big plus. He's not had to get up at any particular time in the morning. He's not had to wear anything more taxing than a pair of pants. I've never seen him happier. And he likes school, he's very social, but he has been so happy. And I said to him, as I think Beth was probably on one of her many FaceTime calls to her best friend, and I said to him, do you miss your friends, Jamie? Do you want me to you could FaceTime them as well? I said, you could chat to them. And he looked at me like I'd taken leave of my senses and said, oh, why would I want to do that? And I was like, I don't know, to be nice. I said, and then I was worried, and then I said, my goodness, have you fallen out? And he was like, no, I haven't fallen out. And I said, so do you not miss them? Are you lonely, son? I was worried, I was concerned. He literally looked at me like I had two heads and was like, oh, soon when I go back to school, it's fine. So yeah, so there's contrast. Maybe it's between boys and girls, or maybe it's just between my two children. But they've been amazing. And then Jamie has made me laugh when subsequently, as lockdown restrictions have lifted, and we've arranged for him to meet up with a couple of his friends, and I've been like, oh, isn't this lovely? You haven't seen each other for months. And they're like, oh yeah. And then they've sat for the entire time and literally stared at screens next to each other. And then his friend's gone home, and I've been like, oh, did you have a nice time? You didn't seem to, interact that much. He's like, yeah, we had a brilliant time. And I was like, okay, fine. Like I say, maybe it's a boy thing, maybe it's a Jamie thing, I don't know. But the kids have been amazing, they really have. I would say one of the early challenging parts of a lockdown life for us was definitely home education. Now, I am not a teacher, and I now know without any shadow of a doubt all the reasons why I never became a teacher, because I would be fucking awful. I really would. I just have no patience. I have no patience whatsoever. I love and adore my children, but my God, trying to impart knowledge. Teachers, honestly, you all deserve some kind of sainthood or something. You really are incredible. So the kids' schools were amazing. They were amazing throughout. I'm sure people have had mixed experiences, but I can say hand on heart that both my children's schools have been amazing throughout this entire period. Beth had her work set online, and again the contrast between my children. So Beth had her work set online. She's very bright. She's very switched on. So her approach was, right, I'm going to get up first thing. I'm going to sit down in front of my computer. I'm going to blitz it. And she's bright, so it doesn't take her long. An hour and a half. That's it. She's done for the day. She's done, and then she can go and do what she wants, FaceTime her bestie, whatever she wants to do. Jamie is so far on the other end of that spectrum, it's almost impossible for me to describe. And again, his school were amazing. They set him, sort of loads of work, and he needed a bit more support. And it's hard, right? When you as a parent, when you're both working full time, I don't know about anybody else, but I have never felt more guilt than during this whole lockdown experience, in terms of just feeling like you're letting everybody down. And that's with the most amazing employer who couldn't have been more supportive, and the most amazing kids and the most amazing schools for the kids. So like I say, I fully appreciate how incredibly lucky I've been. But we kind of worked out a bit of a compromise, really, whereas while Beth would just crack on and pretty much get on with it, Jamie needed a little bit more support. So he and I would sit down in the mornings and we'd work out what he needed to do. And then my hope and my belief was then, we'd agreed what he would do, and then he would do it. But it turns out with preteen boys, there's quite a gap between, saying, yeah, I'm going to do something and actually doing it. And probably he's going to kill me for sharing this with you. Probably my favourite Jamie moment, which I have told everybody I've met. and he's laughed, and I think it probably, hopefully, ensures he won't do it again. I think my favourite Jamie moment was he had a really big history project to do, and he quite likes history. As I recall, I think it was on the Black Death, so it was all quite interesting and quite gory. So he was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to really do this. And so I sat down with him about 10 o'clock when he dragged himself out of bed, and we talked about this project, and he said, right, I'm going to really work on it. And it happened that day that myself and Mr. I Know I Need to Stop Talking had a number of meetings on, so I didn't have the ability that I usually had, which was to regularly pop in and see how he was doing. He came down for lunch. I said, how's it going? He was like, yeah, no, I'm working on it. I'm really working on it. And I was like, okay, brilliant, Jamie. Well done. Great job. So it got to the end of the day. It got to about 6 o'clock. And he's still upstairs on his computer. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he's worked for 7-8 hours today, which is far more than, I think he should need to. So I went upstairs and I said, Jamie, oh, love, you've done so well. It must be time to stop now. You've really worked. You worked so hard. I said, right then, let's have a look at what you've done. And he looked at me with this kind of sort of sideways, awkward look, and went, and I said, let's see all the work that you've done. You've worked so hard today. Let me have a look at what you've done. Can't wait to read all about the Black Death. And he went, I just need to find where it is. And at this point, I'm thinking what probably you're all thinking, which is, oh no, he's not done that thing we've all done where he hasn't saved it. God, what a nightmare. So I sort of helpfully suggest to him where it might be, and he kind of he's looking around as though looking for a needle in a haystack. And I'm like, Jamie, it can't be that hard. It's the piece of work you've been working on all day. All I will say to you is that in the 7 and a bit hours Jamie had been sat in front of his computer doing his project on the Black Death, I would ask how much do you think he might have completed in terms of work during that 7.5 hour period? Well, during that 7.5 period, it turned out Jamie had written 3 sentences. 3 sentences. They weren't even long sentences. And they were misspelt. 3 short misspelt sentences. And I looked at him and I went, is this it? And he looked back and he was like, I may have got distracted. No shit, Sherlock, you may have got distracted. So, yeah, we had a new homework regime after that, which involved him spending substantially more time closer to me and out of wind of any potential distractions. So yeah, it's been a mixed bag. There's definitely no way that I've been able to replicate the amazing work that their teachers do. And I know there's all kinds of uncertainty around what happens when the schools reopen, which is probably another blog post in itself. But I think actually under really difficult circumstances, they've both done a cracking job. I definitely fell foul of that thing at the start of lockdown where I think we all kind of convinced ourselves we were going to be superhuman. I had this... And the worst thing is I went and told everybody that I was going to do this as well. I had this insane... Well, I don't think it was insane. So I can touch type. I taught myself to touch type when I was about 16, just because I thought it would be useful to do. And oh my goodness, it's turned out to be one of the most useful skills ever. I can type at about 100 words a minute, which when you write a lot is very useful. And I thought, well, typing, it's not something that gets taught in schools. Understandably, they have to focus all their time on very important things like fronted adverbials. So I was like, okay, well, typing, this is, this rare opportunity, this period of time when my children have additional time in the day, they can learn to touch type. This will make them more efficient and more effective and will help their future career. My God, I'm a genius as a parent, is what I told myself. It will probably come as no surprise to anybody apart from maybe the me at the start of lockdown that, no, my children have not learnt to touch type during this time, despite me buying them a nice all singing or dancing touch typing program, which I remembered to remind them about twice. And yeah, that went the way of all the others. Remember all the other stuff we were all going to do at the start of lockdown? I was absolutely convinced that I was going to paint my bathroom. Convinced. I'd pick paint colours and everything. Not only does my bathroom remain unpainted, I haven't even bought the bloody paint. So yeah, I think the lockdown enthusiasm that perhaps we might all have had has definitely worn up. So that was kind of home education side of things. Obviously in between that, like I said, myself and Mr. I Know I Need to Stop Talking were both working full time from home. And I think we both count ourselves incredibly lucky to be able to do that. And my job particularly is made up of a lot of meetings. and therefore a lot of Zoom calls. And oh my goodness me, while there's lots of brilliant things about remote working, I cannot wait to go back to face-to-face meetings, purely so I don't have to stare at my face the entire time I'm on a Zoom call. I mean, the Zoom people, if you're listening to this and you could possibly change the functionality so I don't have to see my own face, you would make me one very happy lady. So I've had a lot of Zoom calls, and as anybody who's tried to work at home with small children during this period of time will know, Zoom calls plus children plus pets as well. I think my colleagues have seen the inside of my cat's anus during this time far more times than they probably would wish to do so. Now, Zoom calls for me were made a bit more complicated by the fact that both my children have been into my work a lot, and they know most of my colleagues. They know most of my colleagues pretty well. So I think Beth particularly thought that these Zoom calls every day were almost like a little extension of her social life. She'd like waltz into sort of sometimes fairly serious meetings. One of my favourites was when she turned up halfway through, like I say, it was a fairly full-on meeting, and she turned up halfway through to see my boss, who she knows very well on the screen, and she was like, hi, look at this cake I've made, and just brandished this Victoria sponge cake, which she had made. It was a very nice cake, into the middle of the screen. So yeah, that was one of my favourites. And they understand that when we're working that they can't interrupt us, but your version of your and my version of not interrupting, and certainly Beth's version of not interrupting, are two very different things. So she started to resort to, she knew that she couldn't come and talk halfway through, so she started to resort to writing notes of things that she felt were so important they couldn't possibly wait until I got off that Zoom call. Things like the fact that one of her favourite YouTubers was going on holiday to the same destination as us. I mean, personally, I feel that could have waited another 20 minutes. Beth clearly felt not. My absolute favourite, which I think I did post on the blog at the time, was when she sort of sidled in and put a note down on the desk next to me. As I said, I was on this call and I sort of glanced at it out of the corner of my eye. And the note said, "Hi Mum, there are feathers under my bed. ... Oh, and a bird." So yeah, that was fun having a bird turn up. Oh, there was also the time that one of the cats brought a live mouse into the hallway whilst I was midway through a Zoom call. So yeah, working full time has definitely been challenging. But as I say, definitely count ourselves as incredibly lucky to be able to work from home and do so. But goodness me, if anything has ever proved that teaching is not for me, this lockdown experience has definitely done that. I think one of the other challenges we found as a family during lockdown is trying to keep fit, right? Because actually, when you're working and you're at home all day, I mean, I've done that thing of, I need a wee, I'm going to run up the stairs and use the upstairs toilet and not the downstairs cloakroom. But let's be honest, it's hardly marathon training. So I sort of said to the kids, because Beth, as I say, is used to doing sport 8 or 9 times a week, we talked about how we were going to keep fit during lockdown. Jamie obviously looked at me as though I'd taken leave of my senses and went, why would we want to do that? And then Beth came up with the idea that we should all learn to do keepy-uppies. If I tell you to imagine someone very uncoordinated and then multiply that by about the power of 5,000, that is basically Jamie and I. The athletic coordination that Beth shows on a football pitch is definitely not passed through the family, certainly to myself or to Jamie. But she was determined that we were going to learn to do keepy-uppies, so she dutifully took us out into the garden every evening and drilled us doing our keepy-uppies. All I can say is that one of them, lots of people talked about getting to know their neighbours during lockdown. I have got to know my neighbours very well during lockdown, primarily with "I'm so sorry, another football has gone into your garden." And the best bit is that my kids have their names on their football, so it's not even like we can pretend that it belongs to somebody else. Jamie was like, "Oh, I don't think it was me that kicked that ball over there." I was like, "It says Jamie on the football." He's like, "Oh, yes, I can see that might be a problem." So we learned to do keepy-uppies. I managed 15 in a row, a feat I doubt I will ever repeat again. But yeah, 2020, I can certainly say, if nothing else, I learned to do keepy-uppies. I filmed myself doing some keepy-uppies. And when you like imagine yourself in terms of, sort of how you are when you do a thing. I think I imagined myself that I would be like, sort of a Lionel Messi. I would be like gentle tap, tap, taps. I'd be so coordinated. I mean, when I watched this video back that I took of myself doing keepy-uppies, I look like my feet are on fire and I'm trying to put put the flames out. It is a graceful display of coordination. It most definitely is not. So we did a few keepy uppies to try and keep fit. I also dragged them both out on a daily walk, and when I say drag, that pretty much was the literal truth. You would have thought that I was asking them to walk up Everest. It was literally like we're going to go for a walk. Oh God, Mum, why would you do this to us? You know, the trauma, the cries of, are we nearly there yet, started before we even left the bloody house as we went out on walks. But they are definitely one of my good memories from lockdown, once you got past the whinging and the complaining. And Jamie then diverted it to asking the most random existential questions he could possibly think of. So therefore ensuring that walking exercised not only our bodies but also my brains, and left me each time coming home feeling like I needed a little bit of a lie down. Obviously, they've fallen out with one another. It goes without saying. We're very lucky that we, sort of have the space for them both. They both got a PC each, which we have in a room together. So they've been sat next to each other for big periods of time. So the number of times that I've had to go in and intervene because Beth's foot is within a 30 centimetre distance of Jamie's chair, or Jamie is breathing in a way that is annoying me. We've clearly had to go and break up multiple arguments such as that. In fact, I did definitely reach a point in peak lockdown where I tended to start each day going, okay, you're going to do this work, you're going to do this work. And before anybody starts on this, can I just check, is anybody planning to be a knob today? Yes? No? Good? Right, on we go. So yeah, we've definitely had ups and downs in terms of inter-family relationships during this period. The other defining feature for me of lockdown, without a shadow of a doubt, is going to be the sheer number of meals I have made. Oh, good grief. And I know, right, it's making a meal, it's hardly rocket science or going out and doing some hugely physical job, but I feel like I've been serving in a restaurant that does about 72 covers a day since March, effectively. I had no idea how much two massive children could eat in one period of time. It has been staggering. And I hadn't realised how much I appreciated the fact that, go to school and they get fed. And although you're still making meals, you're not making every bloody meal. But oh my goodness me, I mean, Jamie's daily diet, his commitment to eating is it should be admired and marvelled at, really. He'd kind of get up about, I don't know, any time before midday usually, and come downstairs and consume roughly 2/3 of a loaf of bread. Then about 45 minutes later, he'd be back asking what was for lunch, so we'd eat lunch. Then over the course of the afternoon, he'd kind of it was like a plague of locusts had descended on my fridge and would literally raise through the contents, sort of collecting whatever he could find. I think I shared the photo on Facebook when we were tidying up the kitchen one afternoon, and he was wearing his dressing gown. And I looked at him and I did kind of a double take, and I was like, Jamie, what's that in your pocket? And he's like, oh, it's in case I get hungry. I was like, well, what do you mean in case you get hungry? He's like, well, I might. My bedroom's a long way from the kitchen. It really isn't. Anyway, beside the point, in his dressing gown pocket, he had half a cooked deep pan pizza, which was just sitting there, I guess, in case he needed a snack. And then obviously, sort of making dinner as well. And then as football training's come back, kind of post-football training dinner as well. Oh my goodness me. If I never have to look for another recipe in my life, it will probably be too soon. We've made a lot of meals. But obviously, Jamie's feedback for me is that I've really upped my game on the cooking front during lockdown. Thanks, son. God, feedback's a gift, isn't it? Feedback's a gift. I think the biggest mystery of lockdown for me is how the fuck my washing pile has always been so absolutely huge. Nobody's worn any clothes. I swear to God, I have not seen my children in anything other than pants, pyjamas, or a dressing gown since March. And yet my washing pile has always been to the absolute brim. I'm looking to the side. I've literally got 4 bags of clean washing, which after this I'm going to go and put away. Goodness me, isn't parenthood a gift? So yeah, it's going to be a shock to the system for everybody concerned, I think, when they have to leave the house and actually wear something slightly more challenging than that underwear. But despite all of this, as I've said all along, I do feel so incredibly lucky. Like I say, we're very lucky in our family circumstances. I think we're also really lucky with the kids being the age that they are, and actually they are at a point where they are a little bit self-sufficient, and actually, you know what, if I really kick off and say, I can't make another meal, Jamie will go and make himself 500 rounds of toast and might even offer to make me a cup of tea at the end of it. You never know. I think when I think back to how I felt when my children were very young. And I'm the first to put my hand up and say that I have a lot of strengths as a parent, but parenting children under the age of 5 is definitely not one of them. I don't know how I would have done it. I mean, you do, right? You get on with it and you do what you need to do to get through every day. But certainly for those of you who've got younger children, fair play. And my goodness, I hope you have had all of the gin and are going to do all of the lying down in a darkened room once this is over, and hopefully childcare facilities open back up again, and like I say, you can go and just sit and rock quietly in a corner, which is definitely what I think I would need to do. But the school's going to open up, which in itself will present all kinds of challenges. As I say, that's probably a podcast for another day. I will literally be the person running away, screaming, clicking my heels as I'm in some kind of Rodgers and Hammerstein musical as my children go in through the school gates. The slight downside of all of that being just the little teeny tiny challenge of the fact that given their current waking time is somewhere around late morning to midday, how I'm going to get them out of bed in time is concerning in itself. That will be the challenge for this week. And perhaps that will be next week's podcast. Jamie starts school at the end of this week, so I will give you an update on how our back to school planning has gone. According to Beth, the new school rule is that everybody has to have all Smiggle stationery when they go back. I said to her I failed to see how that would fall within COVID health and safety requirements, but she assures me that that's the truth. So that probably gives you a good indication of how I think my week is likely to go. So I will update you on all of that next week. That is assuming that at that point we have actually made it to school and I'm not still standing at Jamie's bedroom door going, "Will you get out of bed now? Teeth, hair, shoes!"